Hi, I'm going to share this passage in the Bible that was originally the Judaic Torah. And yes, there's been translations and a lot gets lost through time, but really the points that I'm picking on here, that I'm picking out here, are regardless of the nitty-gritty about what word means what in which translation. So I'm just going to read it out, and then I'm going to read you the Song of Deborah, and I'm going to expose the lie within this text, because a lot of the stories in the Bible are sealed in a sense, in the sense that the important meaning of those stories that have relevance to us today are 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 presently lost behind a facade of misinterpretations or even ignorance of the text itself. I mean, I did not discover Deborah, the story of Deborah, until I was in my 20s, and even though my name is Deborah, I was not aware that my name was a Hebrew name meaning be of Ra, be of God, Deb or Ra. I did not understand that, I did not know that. And yet I'd grown up in this culture. The 1960s, when I was born, Deborah was a very popular name. There was always about 3 or 4 other girls in my class called either Deborah as myself or Deborah. And so when we examine this story, I think it will become clear why Deborah remains an obscure biblical character, even though the name Deborah itself was a very, very popular name. So, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim, because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron, and cruelly oppressed the Israelites. For 20 years they cried to the Lord for help. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel, in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, and his chariots, and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I will not go." "Certainly I will go with you," said Deborah. "But because of the course you are taking, the honour will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command. Deborah also went with him. Now, Heber, the Kenite, had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched his tent by the great tree in Zananim near Kadesh. When they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left. Sisera meanwhile fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was an alliance between Jabin king of Hazel and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone in there?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Just then, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera, with the tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him. And now we have the Song of Deborah. On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. Hear this, you kings, listen, you rulers, even even I, will sing to the Lord. I will praise the Lord, the God of Israel, in song. When you, Lord, went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, when the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned. Travellers took to winding paths. Villagers in Israel would not fight. They held back until I, Deborah, arose. Until I arose a mother in Israel. God chose new leaders when war came to the city gates. But not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's princes, with the willing volunteers among the people. Praise the Lord. You who ride on white donkeys, sitting on your saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road, consider the voice of the singers at the watering places. They recite the victories of the Lord, the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up, break out in song. Arise, Barak, take captives your captives, son of Abinoam. The remnant of the nobles came down. The people of the Lord came down to me against the mighty, some from Ephraim, whose roots were in Amalek. Benjamin was with the people who followed you. From Machir, captains came down. From Zebulun, those who bear a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Yes, Issachar was with Barak, sent under his command into the valley. In the districts of Reuben there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he linger by the ships? Asher remained on the coast and stayed in his coves. The people of Zebulun risked their very lives, so did Naphtali on the terrace fields. Kings came, they fought, the kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no plunder of silver. From the heavens the stars fought. From the courses they fought. Their courses they fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. March on, my soul, be strong. Then thundered the horses' hooves. Galloping, galloping go his mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, she shattered and pierced his temple. At her feet he sank, he fell, there he lay. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she cried out, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed?" The wisest of her ladies answer her. "Indeed," she keeps saying to herself, "are they not finding and dividing the spoils, a woman or two for each man, colourful garments as plunder for Sisera, colourful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck, all this as plunder? So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength." Then the land had peace 40 years. So, now for the interpretation, the expose of what this text is actually telling us, the people of the 21st century today. How this seed blossoms into being according to the knowledge that we have today and the experience that we have today. So what we discover is that there are two kinds of consciousness in operation within the area, the lands where Israel is based. We have a commander of an army like Sisera, who is essentially a tyrant, who has his army amounts to a gang of criminals who are mercenaries and will fight for any king as long as they get a chance to rob, rape and loot and murder, you see. They're not fighting for any specific cause other than satisfying their sexual desires and their greed. And then we have somebody like Barak, who is obviously a righteous man, and he is prepared to employ his army to defeat the mighty Sisera, because Sisera is operating on, look, I have all these men, I have all these chariots with ironwork, I have all these weapons, and so I'm going to do what I want. If I want to go into that village, you know, if this king will grant me the power to do, I will go and do this, I will do whatever I like, because he's operating on the law of might equals right to do as thy will. Whereas Barak, clearly, is operating on the law of right equals might to do as thy will. Are we right? Is my army going to be employed for the purpose of committing crimes against humanity, or is it going to be employed for the purpose of defending humanity from those who wish to commit crimes against them, who believe they are so powerful they have a right to do that, you see. But we also have the concept, the understanding that Deborah, a female, all those thousands of years ago in Israel, a married woman, was leading Israel. And she was a judge. People went to her. She was a wise woman. People went to her to have their disputes settled. So obviously she had a position of power. She was respected as an intellect, as to somebody who could fairly and evenly sort disputes out between people so that they arrive at an amicable conclusion. And, you know, such people are very, very important. And that is something that is lacking in the 21st century world. Oh, yes, politically we have lots of diplomats, but we know they're all serving egotistical, mostly lawless agendas. you see. Now, what is so interesting about this is that, you know, she goes to Barak, and Barak says, yes, yes, I will fight Sisera, but, you know, I am not going to gather this army unless you go with me. So here in Barak we have a man who obviously understands that his strength is doubled when he's got a righteous, strong woman at his side. You see? Whereas Sisera, he isn't marching with a woman, is he? He's marching with his men. So this is very interesting. And also then we have Jael, the other woman, obviously tent-dwelling women, the nomadic tribes people that have traditionally lived throughout the Middle East. And she employs the fact that even though Sisera recognises her as friend because she's a Kenite, nonetheless she recognises that, look, I have no particular patriotism to my culture, my nationality, as it were, when it comes to recognising a criminal. And you are a criminal, Sisera. But nonetheless, he accepts the facade that, oh yes, she's an ally. And he goes into her tent, and then she kills him. You see, so I suppose that's the evidence of Deborah's prophecy, is that she said, yes, Sisera will be handed into the hands of a woman. So women play a very important part in this story, don't they? Women are actually key to defeating a tyrant, a lawless tyrant. Now, when we come to the Song of Deborah, even more is actually revealed, because, you know, we learn that even nature itself takes part, is on the side of humanity in this battle against evil. Because that is what we're looking at here, the archetypal battle of evil against good, and good defeating the evil and succeeding. And the good succeeds because of the way Barak goes about this. That he says, I will not go. If you do not come with me, Deborah, I will not go. Because of the way Barak went about it. You see, they succeeded. And we find that even the stars will move in their courses, will move from their courses in heaven in order to defeat the tyrant. From the heavens the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera. Because, you know, again, this is telling us something. Nothing stays the same. Over time, everything changes. Things move, things happen. Time is a constant of events that lead to another event and another event. And things are changing. You know, the star that is in this particular place in the sky today in the 21st century, centuries ago was in another place in the sky. So, you know, this is supporting the idea of progress, the idea of change, and embracing the change, and acting as is necessary in order to bring about the right change. Because had the people not acted, then they were going to fall victim to the mighty Sisera and the King Jabin, weren't they? And their obviously criminal designs for life. So And even to the point that somebody who may have been considered an ally of the enemy, even she recognises that, look, you know, I don't care if you're recognised as an ally. At the end of the day, you are an evil person, and that is more important than the political alliances. You see, who is right, who is wrong. It isn't that, oh well, I will stand by you and I will protect you simply because my people are aligned or allies of your people. I will only be, personally, I will only be ally to people who I consider are righteous, who are not a criminal. And again, we have a free thinking woman because she's on her own. She's not with her husband. She's a married woman. She's invited Sisera into her tent. She has treated him very kindly. She was not aggressive. He fell asleep. She took the chance to end his life, finally defeat the mighty Sisera, who had murdered how many people? Countless people and children, and actually done a service to life. And this is the most interesting stanza of this song of Deborah. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she cried out, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed? Oh, yes. He's dividing the spoils. He's raping women. He's gathering colourful garments as plunder. Pretty colours, highly embroidered garments for my neck. So again, we have, just as we have the juxtaposition of Sisera and Barak as two male consciousnesses of the same time operating quite differently one to the other, we also have these two sets of female consciousnesses behaving quite differently one to the other in terms of the juxtaposition of Sisera's mother and her handmaidens and Deborah and Jael. Because with Deborah and Jael, we've got independent, free-thinking, autonomous women who are prepared to use their power in battle to protect and defend the innocent from lawless tyrants. Okay. But then when we've got Sisera's mother, on the other hand, who and her handmaidens, they are essentially gangsters' moles, aren't they? They don't care what crimes their menfolk commit. They are subjugated, the slave of their menfolk. But they have these advantages, don't they? They get to wear pretty colours around their neck. They get to benefit from the spoils of their looting and raping and murdering. You see, these two consciousnesses are of the same time. It isn't that, oh, in this period this is how women behaved and thought, and in this period this is how women behaved and thought, and the same for the Barak and Sisera. Oh, this is how men behaved in Sisera's time, this is how men behaved in Barak's time. These consciousnesses are operating simultaneously and are in conflict with each other only because the mighty wants to defeat the right. The mighty wants to ignore what is right in order to exert his will, satisfy his desires. And his women, the chattel, his chattel women, will follow him and support him and admire him and hold their hands out for the pretty colours to wear round their necks. But Deborah and Jael, how would they react on being handed beautifully embroidered garments as a gift and being explained and knowing, being told, oh yes, I went out on a, plundering and looting mission and murdered a few women, raped a few women, killed them, killed the children, and look what I've brought back for you. You see, that's the difference between a consciousness raised within a structure of law that was provided by Yahweh as a guide for the Hebrew people, and people who live lawlessly, who do not accept any such law, who follow the law, the very simple law of, well, might equals right to do as thy will. Have you got the power and strength to enforce your will, to force people to do what you tell them? Then, you're right. Everything you do is right. You are not wrong. Whereas Yahweh is explaining that, yes, you have the might to do whatever you will on this earth, but actually, all physics, all physical things in this universe operate according to the law. And because you are a universal spirit within a physical body, you, in order to be safe, in order to enjoy life and be protected as much as you can, you need to follow a law. Otherwise you are going to suffer. Ultimately, you will suffer. You see? And so we have this understanding. We have this understanding presented to us very, very clearly here. This guidance of how we need to be. That, yes, when it comes to living lawfully, when it comes to being successful in defeating the enemy, then, Barak has not looked at Deborah, because he's not living by the law of might equals right to do as thy will. He's living by the law of right equals might to do as thy will. So he's not judged against Deborah as a woman and said, oh no, I'm not taking you with me because you'll be a hindrance, because you're weak. He's recognised a strong female. But Sisera is weakened precisely because these women are chattel. And he's living by his law of might equals right to do as thy will. He's not receiving any guidance, and eventually he dies by the sword as he has lived by it. And he loses. He loses a battle that he could never win, because ultimately crime will not pay. And we can see, as time has moved on and the story of Deborah has been lost into obscurity, and, like for example, we come to say, let's take Queen Elizabeth I of Britain, which was, the first queen for how long in British history? Until, we didn't have another one until Queen Victoria, and then later Queen Elizabeth II that we have now. But we cannot forget that while Elizabeth I was Queen of Britain, there was no sense that the nomadic people, the gypsy tribes of Britain, or the peasant people of Britain, the women had any such power or autonomy as Jael, the tent-dwelling woman. Okay? And also, we cannot forget that Queen Elizabeth was actually only made queen, really, because she was the only person available that had direct royal lineage that was prepared to uphold the newly created Protestant Church of England, who all stood to lose everything that they had, all the power that they had, if they did not have a strong Protestant ruler. So queen. But she's not queen in the sense of her femininity, is she? She is a queen in the sense of upholding the same male power structures, the concept of might equals right to do as thy will, allegedly serving God's law, and entirely misunderstood, misapplied, misinterpretation of God's law. Because when you actually look at God's law, we understand that the commandments are essentially a promise, aren't they, of how our consciousness as a species will be when we are living according to a structure of law that fosters respect, that fosters kindness, that fosters forgiveness, that fosters compassion. No, you will not covet your neighbour's wife, because as soon as that thought comes into your mind, you will discard it because of the trouble and the damages that it would cause. And yet, when we, and again, you know, looking at Queen Elizabeth I, she doesn't mind receiving the plunder and loot from her armies. She's quite happy. Yes, yes, bring it to my coffers. You know, what you're dealing there with is a gangster's mob who has been educated and raised to accept that position and even become a leader of a nation. But her consciousness is not leading the nation, is it? Her consciousness is just serving the ruling, allegedly male consciousness that created her kingdom in the first place. And unlike Deborah, Queen Elizabeth I was not married, because had she been married, then her husband would have been king and she would have been demoted. And yet Deborah, who is married, she's the leader, not her husband Lapidos. It's Deborah who is the leader. It's Deborah who is the warrior. You know, these are very important points. Because, you know, when we look at the time, say, by the time Jesus came, women are completely demoted. Women do not have anything like the power. It would be unthinkable for Deborah to have that kind of power, or Jael to be autonomous, an autonomous, free-thinking, poor woman. Okay? Commoner. Because Israel, Palestine at that time was under Roman occupation. And again, this is something that seems to be just casually, really, dismissed by the people who are interpreting Jesus' life and looking at what happened in that time. You know, for example, we live still by the headline news that arrived centuries ago, before people really were even permitted to read the Bible. You know, people in Britain, most of Europe, it was forbidden to read the Bible, and even if they could read, even if people could read, they couldn't understand it because it was written in Latin, you see. And by the time people could read the Bible, it was free for all people to read. People were already preconditioned and infected, in that sense, with the gutter press headline news that had been fed to the people, such as, you know, Jesus, Son of God, born from a virgin. And never mind that by the time people get to read the Bible, Jesus never calls himself the Son of God. 78 times he calls himself the Son of Man, and yet still to this very day, people refer to him as the Son of God. Jesus, sacrifice. This is the gutter press headlines, before people were able to read the Bible for themselves. The gutter press. Jesus, sacrifice. God sacrifices his Son to save mankind from sin. Really? Did God sacrifice his own Son? If indeed, you know, according to Jesus, we're all God's children. He called his fellow citizens brother and sister. He taught us to pray to our Father, not his Father. Okay? So, where is the sense here? Where's the sense and sanity? Why would the same God, Yahweh, who stopped Abraham from sacrificing his only and his firstborn son, why would Yahweh then decide to sacrifice Jesus? To save who from sin? What, a load of criminals from sin? To forgive them? What? They need blood. They need the blood of God's child to save them from sin, to provide them with forgiveness. Well, it is a bit like a set of criminals murdering the police and the judge, isn't it? And saying, well, you know, it was necessary for us to be forgiven. You know, there are huge gaps. There are huge gaps. I mean, yeah, a leap of faith is one thing, but a leap into the abyss is quite another. Because a leap of faith is based on an understanding that is so sure. You've got the solidity to say, well, you know, because I understand this, 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 and this, and even though there's a gap here, I can understand that I can actually get over that gap because I have enough information to provide me with an understanding about that. In the same way that, you know, Einstein could predict the presence of black holes simply because he studied the information, even though nobody had found a black hole in space, but he knew they were there because of the information, because of what he understood. And it's the same for people, and that is the leap of faith, isn't it? That you're prepared to commit yourself to that understanding as a fact, even though you don't have the solid evidence in front of you. You see, you're prepared to take, because the facts support each other. But there is quite another thing to have no facts available and take a leap of faith. That's a leap into the abyss, and that is what humanity has done, and that is where we are at today. You know, when we look at the time of Jesus, it's very clear that the kind of law that was operating in Israel at that time was actually Sharia law. And again, a lot of Muslim people for centuries could not read the Quran. They knew the Arabic, they didn't know what it was saying. They didn't know what it meant. I was very shocked when I actually took Shahada and accepted Prophet Muhammad as a prophet of Allah because of my experiences and the dream I had of Prophet Muhammad, that I realised there was more to this man than the gutter headlines that I knew of Islam, which was all I knew of Islam. And I remember going into the mosque and there were these children there learning Arabic and reading the Quran in Arabic. But they did not understand a word of what they were saying. They could read the letters, they could speak the language, but they did not know what they were saying. And I felt very disturbed by that, that in the 21st century, little children were basically being conditioned in exactly the same way that the people of Britain were centuries ago, when by the time they were allowed to read the Bible, but nonetheless they had to read it in Latin, and they didn't understand what the Latin actually meant. So this is how mystery creeps in. This is how then, as I say, they're gutter press headlines. So, you know, obviously when you look at Jesus' time in Israel, women had not anything like the power as expressed in the story of Deborah and Barak. And you find Jesus is there protecting this woman who's about to be stoned to death. You know, that's Sharia law. And yet, you know, 600 years later, people are saying, and people are saying to this very day, oh, Sharia law, yeah, Islam, that's Islamic law. No, it wasn't. It was the law that became common throughout the Middle East, that was commonplace throughout the Middle East, precisely because the Deborah and Barak of society were ultimately oppressed and defeated by both sides, by the enemy within and the enemy without. You see, the only thing that Islam did with Sharia law was include the right to forgive, was include the right to take everything into account, was include the right for a family perhaps to accept compensation or the remorse of the criminal, or to, like I say, take into account, look, this guy stole off you, but actually his mother's seriously ill and his child, and he desperately needed these things, this medicine. He needed money to buy this medicine for his family. And then if they've got a heart, if they're truly with Allah, they will say, oh, that's really terrible. yes, your mother should have been helped, but you know, what you did has really damaged us and it has caused us a lot of problems. So that some agreement can be made. Yes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. It was because of there's forgiveness, there's understanding, there is an attempt to make reparation, to provide some form of compensation. Well, okay, look, I am so sorry I did that to you. I will come and work for you. I will do this, 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 and this. You see? That's a sense of forgiveness, not this idea that people do really evil things and you just say, oh, I've forgiven you. You know, forgiveness would not be enough for Cicera, would it? Because he's got no remorse. He's not prepared to accept that he's doing wrong. He'd just think you were stupid. Oh, Cicera, we forgive you. Yeah, toddle off. He'll come back again in another few years with an even bigger army. Because these people, you know, that psychology does not understand it. It's a criminal. He's obviously got some kind of imbalance within him. Really, such people need help, don't they? But unfortunately, in this world, they're getting helped into power. So, you know, like I say, when when you're looking at the story of Deborah and Barak, what we are witnessing is a period of time which even we haven't reached that today, really. Because again, in Britain, yes, we have Theresa May as Prime Minister. There are female leaders in the world, but they are all really Cicera's mother by majority. They're Cicera's mother, who like Queen Elizabeth was put the first, and Queen Elizabeth of today was placed in power exactly because she could be relied on to uphold the existing status quo. You see, and we are still living with the gutter headline press news, you know, that people say, oh, well, what does all this count for, the Bible, and it's all antiquated and it's got nothing to do with how we're living today, when it has. It's got everything to do, because everything that was written in that has fundamentally shaped Britain as a nation. And like for myself, you know, I feel appreciative of the Judaic people, that they recorded their history, that they have given us so much. And what they have struggled for, and the very fact that their society, their culture allowed for a man like Jesus to rise and be an example, to exemplify the true male human being, who still, to this very day, the world is conspiring to literally bury alive in this heap of historical nonsense, this heap of divisions and judgments and confusion, to the extent that, well, what is it to be a man then? What is it to be a male man? What is it to be a female woman? Because, you know, women of the 19th century in Britain, what, a woman going out to war, leading an army, a woman killing a man in her tent, you know, killing the captain, the leader of an army in her tent. These such things were unthinkable. It was unthinkable that a woman, a married woman, would be going off marching into war with some leader of an army, and that even she would have the power to summon him, and that even he would say to her, "No, unless you're with me, I will not go." You see, we think that we've moved so much forward through time with our technology and our designs and our fancy clothes and our iPhones and blah, blah, blah. But when we look at the period of Deborah and Barak, We are so far behind. They were, they are further ahead psychologically and consciously as a collective of people than we are today. They were successful in defeating tyranny. Today, we aren't defeating tyranny. People are directly profiting from it. As I said, how would Deborah react if, say, her husband came home with some pretty colours for her neck and she realises that, oh, these pretty colours were brought to, I've got them because I went and raped and killed a few people. She would be disgusted. And yet Britain as an empire, Britain as a nation, was quite happy to receive the diamonds, the produce, the gold, everything that was coming from everything that was coming from men like Cicero. Yeah, welcome it, welcome it, welcome it. We'll put it in our shops and we'll sell it and we'll make a profit off it because we don't care how it came. As far as we're aware, we're buying it off the middleman. We don't care how he got it. You see, and that is the system that the world is living on, operating on right now. Basically, Cicero's law. Nobody, oh, go and get the tea off the shelf. Which is the cheapest tea? We'll have that tea. No thoughts for the tea pickers living on 75p a day. Well, they're primitive people, They're an underdeveloped nation. People could call the people of Deborah and Barak's period of time, that period of time, we were underdeveloped. But actually, no, their consciousness was far more highly developed than we are today. We are living in a degraded level of consciousness. We have accepted so much as normal. We have made the compromise after compromise after compromise. And how much of that is that by choice, or how much is it by conditioning? How much is it through confusion, and how much through direct ignorance? So, and I have just done a discussion about ignorance. I think I've called it Educating Chomsky or something, which you can have a look through my videos to find it. But basically asking Chomsky, why hasn't he challenged the corruption in terms of the present day definitions of the words ignorance and ignorant, which have been corrupted to include not knowing, because the core root of the words ignorant and ignorance mean to know and take no notice of. You've got to know. The fundamental building block of the words ignorance and ignorant mean to know and to take no notice of. And so ignorant and ignorance is the act of doing that or being that, aren't they? Of knowing and taking no notice. So how can it include not knowing? Not knowing is to be mystified, isn't it? Or perhaps you don't know because you're confused. And that's the whole point of, why I do my stuff and I share what I share, is to erase confusion. And yes, some people will be left feeling wrong. Some people will be left feeling right. But that isn't my fault to that the light reveals the wrongnesses and the rightnesses. How people choose to react according to that is that individual's responsibility. Has the light actually exposed the fact that your thinking isn't quite right, isn't correct, is actually based on a fantasy, as something that's been proven false? The light has proven it false. What, you're going to attack the light now? No. Change. Be like the stars and move from your courses in heaven to defeat the wrong, to defeat the lies, to deliver the light. Move into a new place. Shine shine. Find your inner shine. Because nobody in this world really is responsible for what's going on in our heads, how we've developed as human beings, because of this wealth of history, oppressive history, that has been raining down on us for centuries. And we're born into it. We're born into this consciousness. Our brains, like sponges, absorb. The thoughts are like fishes. And the idea is for us to develop and, yes, cast out what is dead within us, the dead thoughts, the dead consciousnesses, the dead judgments, the judgments of dead men, the judgments of dead women, the opinions and thoughts and beliefs of dead people. They're gone, they're gone. We are the living light today. We are the living light. And it just so happens that Deborah and Barak, okay, their light is still shining. It's still shining. It's like the stars that takes some years for their light to reach our consciousness. Their light is still shining to this very day because they were alive in their life. They are a living consciousness. Who died? Sisera, the tyrant, the tyranny. So, as I say, I am not here to say, oh, this means you're wrong, this means you're right. It is that reality exposes reality. And if we find that, well, actually, our mind, our life reality is mostly trapped in a fiction, and our thoughts are being challenged now by the light, then get with the light. The light isn't there to judge. The light is there to allow the yes, the removal. Yes, it is a painful process. It is a painful process to realise, yes, we did this wrong. Yes, we were wrong. We were wrong. But love, it will tear you down if you're wrong. But only to build you up again. You see, when we understand that the parent chastises the child, not because, we want to crush the child, but because we want the best for that child. We want the child to develop into a full human being with their full faculties, who will not fall victim to lies and deceit, who will not be made a slave to the Siseras of life. And recently I've been sharing some work from Jordan Peterson, and I think he is an amazing guy, and I was very disturbed, to see people really protesting against him because he questions the idea of white privilege and stuff like this. And I think yes, because it is, we need to lose sight of the divisions in a way, because what he says is exactly right and exactly what I'm showing here, and is exemplified by Jael, in the sense that, look, we have a woman here, a person who is of a particular society that is considered an ally of the enemy, and yet she chooses not to be an ally, because it's, as Jordan Peterson explains, and as I've often explained, that, look, criminals are in every society. They are not unique to any one culture. Criminals are there. We can see that in Africa. Now, it's mainly black African leaders. They can be every bit as cruel and oppressive against their people as the white people, because we're dealing with the psychology. It isn't according to the colour of our skin. We're dealing with the psychology. White people have been every bit as much oppressed by the same psychology and consciousness that was enslaving African people, had murdered over 2 million British people. You see? Because it isn't a black and white issue, but the consciousness makes it a black and white issue. It's because then we get to fight these black and white wars. And while ever we're fighting the black and white wars of one side against the other, we are actually denying the colours of life. That is the purpose, you see. But when it comes to, like, for example, Deborah and Barak's time, they had no choice. They could see, look, this guy's going to come. This is what they do, and now he's getting ready to attack these innocent people. Please, what can we do? We act. We do something, and that is where we're at today. Except it's our whole planet under attack today. So we need to lose these divisions, don't we? We need to lose these antiquated judgments. And we need to unite as a species in all our diversity, give credit where credit's due. And that is what the Song of Deborah does, doesn't it? And ultimately, are Deborah and Barak giving praises to themselves? No, they're giving praises to everybody who took part. Everybody. And most of all, to God. And, you know, like I say, all of this from just understanding one story in the Bible, and there's so many, you know, because this is something after I'd witnessed this event of golden light being, you know, suddenly it was as if a veil had been lifted from my consciousness. Suddenly I could receive the shine, and the shine's still there. There's a lot of thick dust, but the shine's still there in these texts, which are a historical record of human consciousness. That these people that are expressed, their life stories that are shared in the Bible, are the same people that have been found in every culture, every human culture on earth at any given time. You will find the people who want to live fairly and righteously and non-judgmentally, who follow a fair system of law that affords respect, that looks after children, that doesn't oppress people. And you will find people that want to do the opposite, the criminals, you see. But this world has managed to reach at such a situation that the whole of the world is literally, the economic system itself is operating on this law of might equals right to do as thou will. There is no doubt about it. Why? Because we've been so busy fighting against each other because of our little petty differences and our little petty divisions. And, you know, it's that Jordan Peterson is addressing. And it's typical, isn't it, that, you know, the so-called Marxists or what have you will pick up on that and say, no, he's supporting white supremacy. He is denying the fact that racism exists. When he isn't. He's explaining that by focusing on something, you know, to say that being white is itself a privilege, when obviously it isn't, because it certainly wasn't a privilege for me. Okay? But I do understand simultaneously that privileges granted to certain white people have then been transposed onto people of other nations, and they then judged those people as inferior. And that as a white person, I do have a responsibility to acknowledge that, about that this was done by my race. I don't feel guilty about it, because I've never been part of that consciousness. I find it disgusting. But I feel equally oppressed by it. You see. And that was why, you know, Martin Luther King, he had not just Afro-Americans were supporting him, a lot of white people were supporting him too. Martin Luther King was not speaking purely for black people, was he? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was speaking for humanity. That was the point. And I think that's the point with Jordan Peterson that people seem to have lost or misinterpreted. That, look, this guy is speaking for humanity. And I think the same here of what I'm sharing of the story of Deborah from the ancient text of the Torah, this record of human history, human psychology, is speaking to humanity, you see. So thank you for taking time to listen. I hope that people have learned from it. What can I do except share this stuff? I've got it in my head. I have written stuff down, but what is the point? There's that many books out there, and really, you know, who is going to publish my book? I am a nobody. I'm not some highly educated academic, but nonetheless, I feel these things are important. That is very important to realise that, look, a few thousand years ago, in the Middle East, in a land called Israel at that time, were, you know, things were happening. The dynamics between male and female were actually way ahead of even our times that we're living in today. We have lagged behind. The technology's moved forward. We have lagged behind. So let's move forward. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. Let's get enlightened. Let's progress. Let's be like the stars in heaven. So, thank you, and God bless to all.